In the year 3087, the stars no longer brought wonder, they brought fear. The galaxy, once alive with trade, diplomacy, and exploration, now echoed with silence and fire. Worlds that once sang with life now drifted lifeless, their surfaces scorched, black. The reason had a name, and every species knew it: Drexari. The name itself brought shivers. An ancient, ruthless force of biomechanical horror, the Drexari didn't speak, didn't bargain, and showed no signs of mercy. They had no faces, only armor that oozed and pulsed like it breathed. Their ships were not built, they were born. And they came not to conquer, but to erase. No species had stopped them. Not the crystal-minded Zalari, nor the weapon-mad Heron Dominion. Every effort, every combined fleet, every genius strategy had ended the same way, with drifting wreckage and screams lost in space. One by one, systems fell, colonies vanished, hope faded, and through it all, there was silence from Earth. Humanity had once been known for its stubbornness, its strange mix of creativity and chaos. But for 50 years, no one had heard from them. Their ambassadors vanished. Their trade ships stopped arriving, and even their allies received no answers. Most believed Earth had fallen. Some thought humans had simply given up and turned inward, accepting their fate. Then, as if summoned by fate itself, the silence was broken. In the middle of the Valkor Warzone, the most brutal sector in the galaxy, where over 400 Drexari warships circled like vultures around the corpse of a dead planet, something changed. The void rippled, space itself twisted. A tear opened, wide and shimmering like a wound in reality. From that tear, they came. Sleek black ships unlike anything seen before slipped through the rift, each one outlined in a blue glow that whispered of technologies beyond understanding. At their head was a monster of a vessel, taller than cities, longer than space stations, and pulsing with quiet, restrained power. The name stamped in silver across its hull read, HSS Titan. The Drexari moved immediately. Their instincts screamed. Invader, target, threat. Hundreds of ships adjusted formation, weapons locking onto the newcomers, protocols activated. But something happened that had never occurred before. They hesitated. For reasons even their hive intelligence couldn't explain, the Drexari paused. Their scanners, reading the ships, returned nothing familiar. No energy signatures they could track. No weaknesses they could exploit. Only a strange frequency, one they had never heard before, pulsing through the void. The humans, silent for 5 decades, spoke for the first time. The message was simple, delivered through every channel, in every language known to the galaxy. This war ends now. No reply came from the Drexari, only motion. Their ships surged forward, engines burning, mouths of their living cannons glowing bright. But the humans did not move. They didn't fire. They didn't run. Their ships floated calmly, waiting. The first Drexari shot screamed across space. A line of searing plasma aimed straight at the Titan. It never landed. Right before contact, the energy rippled and vanished. Gone. No explosion, no impact. As if the shot had been swallowed by the vacuum itself. Another Drexari ship launched a wave of living missiles, wriggling through space like insects. The moment they neared the human formation, they stopped mid-flight, turned to liquid, and dispersed into harmless particles. Confusion rippled through the Drexari fleet. Confusion, followed by fear, a concept unknown to them, yet undeniable now. And then, without warning, the sky broke open, not with sound, but with absence. The Drexari ships began to die. One blinked, and a destroyer that had stood for centuries cracked in half like glass. Another disappeared, not exploded, not destroyed, erased. Entire vessels folded inward like they had never existed, vanishing into themselves. There were no explosions, no fire, just a slow, creeping wave of annihilation. The human ship still had not fired a single visible weapon. On the bridge of the Titan, lights flickered softly. A calm voice, not human but not cold, spoke. Weapon, Phantom-class entropy field, activated. It had a tone like someone announcing the weather. Outside, the Drexari fleet was being undone. More ships fell, one by one, quietly, inevitably. A few tried to flee, burning across the Warzone with full speed. They didn't make it. A pulse of strange energy swept through the field, and every fleeing ship simply stopped. Their engines died. Their bodies cracked. Then they, too, were gone. At that moment, the watching galaxy awoke. Hundreds of ships from distant species were observing, hidden, cloaked, distant, but watching. And they saw what no one had ever seen. The Drexari losing. And not just losing. Crumbling. Breaking apart like myths in the face of truth. The humans had returned. But they had not come back as they were. In the silence of space, with the stars above, them and death around them, they stood like shadows of a forgotten empire, one that had hidden, waited, grown. And now, it was moving. The war had begun again, but something in the hearts of all who watched said, this time, it would not last long. The Drexari fleet, momentarily stunned by the sudden onslaught, quickly regrouped. Their hive intelligence, a collective mind controlling each vessel, understood only one thing: destroy the threat. The instinct to eradicate was wired into every fiber of their existence, and so they launched their attack without hesitation, once more sending waves of energy and missiles towards the human fleet. The human ships remained silent, unmoving, their black surfaces gleaming in the distant stars. Nothing prepared the Drexari for what came next. Without warning, a Drexari warship, the Ravager, opened fire with its primary weapon, a beam of energy capable of vaporizing anything it touched. The beam shot across space, a brilliant flash of destruction aimed directly at the lead human ship, the Titan. It never reached its target. The beam of light bent in mid-flight, twisting like water caught in a strong current, before it simply vanished, swallowed by the nothingness between the ships. The Drexari had seen many things in their conquests, but this was impossible. Their weapons, their most powerful tools, were useless. The Ravager fired again, this time unleashing an array of smaller energy blasts, each more precise and faster than the last. They streaked through the cold void, aiming to strike down any of the human ships. But just as before, they dissipated before they could make contact. It was as though the energy itself had lost its power, consumed by some invisible force. The Drexari commanders began to panic, their shared mind murmuring in uncertainty, confusion, and dread. The humans did not retaliate. They did not fire a single shot. Instead, they let the Drexari's attacks come, let them strike, but nothing hit, nothing connected. The energy blasts fizzled out in mid-air. The missiles dissolved into clouds of harmless vapor. One of the Drexari ships, a smaller vessel, decided to take a different approach. It powered up its engines, rushing toward the human fleet at blinding speed. The ship, sleek and deadly, fired, a barrage of missiles, hoping to catch the humans off guard. But just before the ship reached the human formation, it slowed inexplicably, its engines stuttering as if something had grabbed hold of them. The Titan's weapons had not fired, yet the Drexari ship stopped dead in its tracks, caught by an invisible grip. The ship trembled, then folded inward, its outer layers collapsing upon itself. It was gone in an instant. No explosion, no debris. It was as though the ship had been erased from existence. A voice, calm and detached, echoed through the Titan's command center, and the crew, though human, did not flinch at the voice's chilling tone. Weapon, Dimensional Singularity Generator. Activated. A flicker of blue light illuminated the Titan's hull. As the Drexari ships moved closer, trying to adapt, trying to regroup, the effects of the human technology became more apparent. The next ship that ventured too close to the human formation simply vanished, swallowed by a rift that appeared out of nowhere. It was not a weapon of destruction in the conventional sense. There was no bomb, no blast, just an absence. The ship, all its components, its systems and crew, ceased to exist within moments. Another Drexari ship attempted to escape, but like the others, its engines sputtered and died. The ship drifted helplessly, surrounded by nothing but empty space. At that moment, the Drexari fleet began to experience something new, a profound sense of helplessness. Their enemies, humans, had no need for traditional weaponry. They didn't need to launch missiles or fire energy beams. They had something far more dangerous at their disposal: the ability to manipulate the very fabric of space itself. Each Drexari ship was struck not by a weapon, but by an unseen force. Some vanished completely, others collapsed in on themselves. It was as though the Drexari were being erased from time and space, pulled into an inescapable void, a space where their existence was simply wiped away. At the Titan's helm, the humans observed in silence, their minds focused on the task ahead. They had prepared for this moment. Years of research, decades of hidden advancement had led them here, to this battle that would turn the tide of the galaxy. The enemy's fear was palpable, but the humans had no desire to drag this out. They didn't need to prove their might in flashy displays of destruction. They only needed to end the war, quickly, efficiently. The Drexari fleet, now disoriented and in chaos, began to scatter. Several ships attempted to retreat, desperately trying to escape the force of the human technology. But their engines faltered, their systems shutting down without warning. In moments, they were crippled. For the first time in recorded history, the Drexari were running, not toward a victory, but away from it. They had become the hunted. Yet, despite their flight, there was no pursuit, no need. The humans let the Drexari scatter, let them drift away. They didn't chase. They didn't follow. They let the fear consume the enemy as they fell apart, piece by piece. The battle, which had begun only minutes earlier, was nearly over. Meanwhile, on the Drexari homeworld, in the depths of the hive mind core, the alien commanders began to panic. A single thought pulsed through their collective mind. How could this be? The Drexari had never known defeat. Their ships were invincible, their technology unparalleled. Yet here, against a race that had been lost to history, they were being destroyed, wiped away without so much as a chance to retaliate. The hive mind, composed of millions of minds fused together, struggled to comprehend the situation. The humans, it seemed, had become something more than their simple mechanical counterparts. The rules had changed, but it was too late. The Titan and its fleet remained motionless, the damage done. The remaining Drexari ships, scattered and leaderless, drifted helplessly in space, unable to fight back. The humans had entered the war zone, and within minutes, the enemy was no more. The impossible had happened. The once feared Drexari were gone, as if they had never existed at all. The battle that had seemed destined to last for decades was over before the first shot was truly fired. As the void settled into an eerie silence, the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter. The Drexari fleet had been all but erased, their remnants scattered across space like forgotten echoes. The battle had ended not with an explosion, not with a violent display of force, but with an almost unnatural stillness. The human ships, once invisible in the galactic shadows, now stood in full view, untouched by the carnage around them. The Titan, the flagship of the human fleet, remained at the center, its black hull gleaming faintly under the distant light of nearby stars. Within the ship's command center, there was no cheer, no celebration. The crew moved silently, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of screens and panels. They had done what was necessary. The Warzone had been cleansed, the Drexari threat extinguished, but there was no sense of victory. For the humans, it wasn't about glory or conquest. It was about survival. It was about securing a future that had long been in doubt. Captain Marlowe stood at the front of the command center, his gaze fixed on the holographic display in front of him. The once deadly war zone was now eerily calm, a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded just moments before. The Drexari ships had dissolved into nothing, their once powerful fleet now reduced to drifting debris and void. Yet, despite the immediate success, Marlowe knew the galaxy had seen only the beginning of a much larger conflict. The Drexari were not just an enemy. They were a force of nature, an unstoppable tide that had swept across the galaxy for centuries. No species had ever stood against them and lived to tell the tale. Until now. The humans had done what no one else could, but the question remained: why? Marlowe's mind drifted to the reports he had read in the weeks leading up to this moment. His superiors had been cryptic, shrouding their orders in layers of secrecy. The Titan had been designed not just as a warship, but as a weapon, an experiment in technologies beyond human comprehension. The ship itself was a marvel, but it wasn't just the ship that had made this victory possible. It was something else. Something buried deep within the human race. The crew had heard the stories, of course, the myths, the legends, the whispers of Earth's lost history. The human race was not as innocent as the galaxy thought. Humanity had once wielded powers that transcended science, technologies that could reshape reality itself. And now, after centuries of isolation, they had returned, not just to reclaim their place in the stars, but to reassert their dominance. "Captain," came a voice from behind. It was Commander Cora, the second in command, her voice steady but carrying the weight of 1,000 questions. "The remaining Drexari ships are retreating. What's our next move?" Marlowe turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "We don't chase them," he replied simply. "Let them flee. They won't return. Not in the way they think." Cora nodded, her brow furrowing. She had seen the reports too. The Drexari had been forced to retreat not because of their loss in battle, but because their very existence had been altered. Their ships hadn't just been destroyed, they had been erased from existence. An effect that defied every law of physics, every theory of space and time. And it wasn't just their ships that had been affected. "Captain," Cora pressed, "the technology we're using, what exactly is it? We've never seen anything like it before. We don't understand it. It's beyond anything we've ever imagined." Marlowe paused, glancing at the holographic projection of the battle. The Drexari ships, now nothing more than floating wreckage, were slowly drifting in the vacuum of space. Their once feared weapons were now useless, their fleet nothing but shattered fragments of metal and circuitry. He couldn't explain it. To her. No one could explain it. The truth was, humanity hadn't just returned with weapons. They had come back with something else. Something ancient, something forgotten. Buried deep within the fabric of their race was a power that had been lost to history, a force that could rewrite the rules of reality itself. The humans had tapped into this power, and now the galaxy would feel its consequences. The captain's mind wandered back to the early days of Earth's isolation. There had been a time when humanity's advancements had outstripped even the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. They had reached the stars, yes, but they had also begun to reach beyond them. They had unlocked secrets of the universe that no one else could even comprehend. But something had happened. Something terrible. and humanity had been forced to retreat into the shadows, leaving behind their great achievements, their forgotten technologies, and their darkest secrets. And now they had returned. A cold shiver ran down Marlowe's spine. The humans had not just emerged from isolation, they had emerged changed. They had returned not as conquerors, but as something more, as the wielders of a forgotten force, an ancient power that could bend space, time, and matter itself. The technology on the Titan wasn't just the result of advanced engineering. It was something else, something much older, tied to the very essence of humanity. And now, that power had been unleashed. In the quiet that followed, Marlowe and Cora shared a silent understanding. There was more at play here than just a victory. Over the Drixari, the humans had reclaimed something far more dangerous than weapons or ships. They had reclaimed the power to reshape the universe itself. But the battle was only the beginning. As the Titan slowly turned its engines to leave the war zone, Marlowe couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of something far greater. The galaxy had only seen a taste of what humanity was capable of, and the repercussions of their return were only beginning to unfold. The Drixari might be gone for now, but there were other forces in the galaxy, forces that wouldn't be so easily cowed. There were factions, empires, and ancient races who would surely see the humans' newfound power as a threat. The galaxy was a place of danger, and the Titan's victory would not go unnoticed. As the human fleet moved away from the now-dead war zone, there was an undeniable sense of unease. The victory was hollow. The galaxy had been put on notice, but what came next would be a far greater challenge. For now, though, the humans would retreat into the shadows once more, letting the galaxy adjust to the truth. Humanity was back, and they were far, far more powerful than anyone could have ever imagined. The Titan slowly drifted away from the battle zone, leaving behind the wreckage of the Drixari fleet scattered like forgotten debris. As the stars outside blinked silently, the crew aboard the massive ship could only watch in stunned silence. The victory had been swift, efficient, and decisive. Yet, for all its apparent finality, there remained an undeniable unease, a weight in the air that hung over the crew like a storm cloud. No one spoke of it aloud, but every person aboard could feel it, the hum of something vast and unknowable, something that had been awakened within humanity. Captain Marlowe stood at the command center, staring at the empty space where the Drexari had once loomed like a monstrous presence. It was now quiet. Too quiet. For a brief moment, Marlowe allowed himself to reflect on the unimaginable victory that had just taken place. The Drexari had been an unstoppable force, a plague upon the galaxy. To have wiped them out in mere moments, without firing a single shot, was something no one had ever expected. Even now, he could scarcely comprehend the magnitude of what had occurred. The human fleet, led by the Titan, was now retreating from the conflict, but there was no sense of celebration. The crew carried on as though this were just another mission. Completed, another battle fought and won. But there was no joy in their movements, no triumphant cheers. Only the cold realization that the war that had ended so quickly might have been the opening act of something far darker. The quiet hum of the engines was the only sound that filled the space around Marlowe, but his mind was far from calm. The ancient technology that had powered the Titan and its fleet was like nothing anyone had ever seen before. It wasn't just advanced, it was alien, woven into the very fabric of reality itself. The power it gave them had been so overwhelming, so unnatural, that Marlowe couldn't help but wonder how long they would be able to control it. Could humanity harness such a force without it consuming them? He thought back to the conversations he had overheard in the corridors of the ship. Whispers, rumors, and speculation about the true nature of the technology embedded within their vessels. The truth was too difficult to fathom. The weaponized ability to alter space, to erase entire ships from existence was a power so great that it seemed to break every known law of physics. No one truly understood how it worked, not even the top minds in the fleet. But they knew one thing. It was too powerful to ignore. And it wasn't just the Titan that had this power. It was embedded in every ship, every piece of technology humanity had brought back with them. "Captain," came the voice of Commander Cora, breaking the quiet stillness. She stepped forward from the shadows, her face unreadable. She, too, carried the weight of the uncertainty that hung over them. "We've intercepted communications from several systems. They're demanding answers." Marlowe nodded, but said nothing at first. He had expected this. The galaxy wasn't going to simply accept that the human race had appeared out of nowhere, wielding the kind of power that could decimate entire fleets without breaking a sweat. Empires, factions, and ancient races who had once believed themselves unchallenged would now be forced to confront the humans. "The Drexari were only the beginning," Marlowe muttered, his voice low. He looked up at Cora, who nodded in agreement. "We've just made ourselves a target for every major power in the galaxy." Cora hesitated, her brow furrowing. "And what do we do about it?" Marlowe took a deep breath and turned his gaze back to the stars outside. The galaxy was full of unknowns, ruthless empires, ancient beings, and powerful factions. The Drexari had been just one piece of the puzzle. But now that humanity had entered the galactic stage, the real danger lay in what would come next. For too long, Earth had remained hidden, isolated from the rest of the universe. But the humans had come back, stronger, faster, and more dangerous than any of the other species could have imagined. The galaxy wasn't ready for this. "We stay hidden," Marlowe said, his voice firm. "We gather information. We understand who might be a threat, and we prepare. This power we have, it's not just a weapon. It's a force. But we don't understand it fully. We need time to figure it out." Cora's expression softened. "And the others? The ones who are calling for answers? They'll have to wait." The captain's voice carried a note of finality. "We can't afford to rush into anything. The galaxy needs time to react to us, but we don't have time to relax either. The danger is out there, and it's already coming for us." With that, Marlowe turned to his command console. He called up the communications logs, watching as the galaxy's many factions began to make their moves. Messages flooded in from all corners of the universe. Some demanded to know what had happened to the Drexari. Others simply ordered that humanity surrender their newfound weapons or face retaliation. There were even some who suggested negotiations, but Marlowe knew that these words were empty. Negotiation wasn't going to happen when a species that could wipe out entire fleets in seconds had suddenly appeared. Yet Marlowe couldn't ignore the fear creeping in. What if they weren't ready for the full weight of what they had unleashed? What if this power they wielded had consequences that no one could predict? The Titan continued its slow path through space, moving further into the unknown, away from the Warzone and into the vast uncharted territories of the galaxy. The fleet behind it followed, silent and observant. For now, they would remain in the shadows, monitoring the reactions of the galaxy, waiting for the inevitable response. But there was no real hiding anymore. The galaxy knew the humans were back, and the power they held was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Whether they were prepared for the coming storm, only time would tell. And as the stars stretched out before them, Captain Marlowe couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy had just entered a new era, one where humanity held the keys to unimaginable power. What came next would determine if they could control it, or if they would be consumed by it.